On 1943, Christmas night settled heavily over the Barents Sea, where darkness swallowed horizon, wind screamed across iron waves, and snow erased distance entirely. Beneath the storm, warships moved like ghosts, engines muted, crews tense, every man aware that Arctic winter could kill as efficiently as enemy fire. December 25, 1943, brought no peace to these waters, only violent weather and heavier purpose. Allied convoys crept toward the Soviet Union, while German commanders sought a decisive strike, gambling steel, fuel, and lives against distance, darkness, and British resolve. The Arctic offered no neutral ground, its freezing spray coated decks with ice, turning steel into glassy traps. Lookouts battled blindness, hands froze to rails, and navigation depended on instruments straining against cold, vibration, and relentless motion beneath endless polar night. Somewhere within that blackness ran Scharnhorst, pride of the Kriegsmarine, fast, heavily armored, and commanded by Konteradmiral Erich Bey. Her mission promised opportunity. British merchantmen vulnerable and slow, yet danger lurked unseen, shaped by radar screens, coded signals, and patient British planning. Snow squalls reduced visibility to moments, then nothing, as wind hammered hulls and superstructures. Every course change risked collision or grounding, yet speed remained essential. In Arctic warfare, momentum offered survival, because stopping meant exposure, ice accumulation, and helplessness beneath hostile guns. For sailors on both sides, Christmas existed only as memory, a distant warmth recalled between watches. The present was metal, darkness, and anticipation. Each man understood that this night might demand everything, leaving families without answers, and oceans holding secrets that history would later uncover. British forces also prowled the storm, cruisers spread wide, radios whispering brief reports through static. Their task was not immediate destruction, but patient shadowing, guiding heavier power toward prey. Discipline restrained excitement, because premature action could scatter the quarry into protective darkness. Above the seas, no moon offered guidance, only cloud and snow reflecting distant star shells yet to come. Time stretched strangely in such conditions, minutes dissolving into hours. Commanders relied on judgment shaped by experience, intuition, and trust in crews hardened by months of northern patrols. Christmas convoys symbolized alliance necessity, steel lifelines feeding Soviet resistance against Germany. Protecting or destroying them carried strategic weight far beyond individual ships. In these waters, tactical encounters echoed continental struggle, where factories, armies, and civilians depended upon what happened during brief, violent engagements at sea. Scharnhorst's crew trusted speed and gunnery, believing escape always possible against slower opponents. Training reinforced confidence, and past sorties encouraged boldness. Yet unseen variables multiplied as British radar quietly stitched darkness into awareness, converting night into a weapon capable of guiding shells with lethal precision. Far to the south, unseen and silent, heavier British units waited, commanders measuring patience against urgency. Admiral Sir Bruce Fraser had chosen caution, arranging forces like pieces upon a frozen board. He intended that surprise, not haste, would decide the fate of Germany's elusive battleship. As midnight passed, the Arctic remained indifferent, witness to approaching violence. Steel closed unseen distances, signals traveled, and intentions aligned. Before dawn, the Barents Sea would claim its due, recording in cold water a lesson about speed, deception, and the unforgiving nature of modern naval war. Scharnhorst sortied with purpose, engines driving hard through rising seas, her bow cutting darkness as orders carried urgency and restrained confidence. Konteradmiral Erich Bey believed speed remained his shield, allowing contact, disruption, and withdrawal before heavier British units could respond decisively. German intelligence indicated Allied convoys nearby, merchant ships burdened and slow, escorted lightly in hostile weather. Such targets promised swift success, political reassurance, and proof that surface raiders still mattered. For Bey, this operation balanced necessity against growing awareness that British vigilance had sharpened considerably. The battleship's crew moved with practiced rhythm, sealing hatches, clearing decks, and securing equipment against ice. Inside turrets and compartments, heaters struggled, breath fogged air, and hands performed rehearsed motions automatically. Confidence existed, but tension lingered beneath discipline, shaped by memory of earlier encounters. Scharnhorst's design encouraged boldness, her speed exceeding most adversaries, her guns capable of decisive blows. German doctrine emphasized initiative, striking unexpectedly, then disengaging before response consolidated. In theory, the Arctic storm favored such tactics, masking approach, confusing escorts, and limiting coordinated resistance. Yet the environment demanded compromise, ice accumulation threatened stability, and reduced visibility hindered gunnery. Radar compensated, providing artificial sight, though operators' new equipment remained vulnerable. Still, Bey trusted technology enough to press forward, believing British forces relied more upon caution than aggression. As Scharnhorst advanced, wireless silence prevailed, broken only by essential reports. The ship's presence remained unknown to merchantmen ahead, whose crews battled cold, unaware of danger. Each mile closed represented opportunity but also commitment, narrowing options should stronger opposition suddenly materialize from darkness. Bey's orders balanced attack and evasion, strike convoys, avoid battleships, disengage if necessary. Such conditional planning reflected German realism by late war, acknowledging material inferiority. Nevertheless, pride influenced decisions and Scharnhorst embodied national expectation. A symbol expected to act, not merely exist. The Arctic night concealed everything equally, friend and foe indistinguishable beyond limited sensor range. Lookouts scanned relentlessly, eyes burning from snow and wind. Every shape threatened deception, every shadow suggested escorting cruisers. Uncertainty became constant companion, shaping judgment moment by moment. Below decks, gunners waited, listening for alarms that would transform routine into chaos. Ammunition lay ready, elevators primed, voices calm but restrained. Training promised efficiency under fire, yet no rehearsal replicated reality of shells arriving unseen, guided by distant operators staring at glowing screens. Scharnhorst's course angled toward reported convoy tracks, engines maintaining high revolutions despite stress. Fuel consumption mattered little compared to success or escape. Bey believed speed could resolve uncertainty, placing his ship where decisions became unavoidable, forcing engagement on his chosen terms. Unbeknownst to the Germans, British forces already reacted, cruisers maneuvering to intercept, radar operators plotting movement patiently. Signals traveled quietly, stitching together pictures Scharnhorst could not perceive. The hunter believed himself alone, unaware he already occupied the center of a widening trap. Thus the sortie continued, momentum carrying steel forward through storm and darkness. With each passing minute, options narrowed, fate shaped by decisions already made. Christmas night advanced toward confrontation, and Scharnhorst sailed confidently into history's closing jaws. Star shells suddenly burst overhead, revealing swirling snow and steel silhouettes. As British cruisers HMS Belfast and Norfolk closed unseen, radar plots had guided them patiently, transforming darkness into certainty, while Scharnhorst remained unaware of watchers tightening distance rapidly now. Belfast fired star shells deliberately, illuminating sea lanes in ghostly light, exposing Scharnhorst's outline against Arctic squalls and rolling waves. Norfolk maneuvered to maintain contact, guns trained steadily, reporting bearings continuously to distant command centers through encrypted voice circuits. Night. On Scharnhorst's bridge, confusion rippled quickly, as unexpected flares erased invisibility and confirmed hostile presence nearby amid driving snow. Suddenly, Konteradmiral Bey ordered evasive action immediately, turning sharply while returning fire, seeking distance without committing fully against shadowing cruisers alone. Scharnhorst's aft turret answered defiantly, shells arcing toward flashes. While engines surged for escape speed through icy seas relentlessly tonight, British cruisers avoided decisive engagement, prioritizing tracking over damage, preserving contact until heavier forces arrived from southern approaches unseen nearby. Snow squalls intensified abruptly, masking maneuvers intermittently, complicating gunnery while radar remained the arbiter for both sides during fleeting moments. British operators compensated expertly, recalculating tracks continuously, sharing updates that kept the shadow unbroken across multiple ships despite interference everywhere. Bey recognized unfavorable odds emerging, yet doctrine demanded initiative, pressing him to disengage decisively without hesitation amid rising danger signs. He ordered a sharp turn and smoke deployment, attempting separation while denying cruisers clear targeting solutions under Arctic night conditions. The cruisers mirrored movements patiently, adjusting courses subtly, refusing to lose the precious radar lock during prolonged shadowing operations tonight. Signals streamed southward continuously, composing a tactical picture that would soon summon overwhelming power from battleships lurking beyond detection range. Scharnhorst's speed advantage still mattered, turbines straining heroically, but geography funneled her path toward British interception zones deliberately planned ahead. Every minute of contact eroded options, transforming pursuit into choreography, with Germans reacting rather than dictating events amid mounting pressure. Crewmen felt the change instantly, tension sharpening senses as fate narrowed corridors of possibility within freezing steel compartments. Everywhere aboard. Orders came clipped and precise, training suppressing fear, while guns roared intermittently through darkness under command discipline carefully maintained always. British commanders exercised restraint deliberately, understanding patience preserved the trap, awaiting the decisive actor positioned farther south in concealment silently. For now the shadow held firm, an invisible leash, guiding Scharnhorst toward unavoidable confrontation beneath winter skies heavy with menace. The exchange marked true beginning of battle, contact without conclusion, shaping everything that followed during that relentless Arctic night onward. Momentum shifted subtly toward Britain, though Germans still believed escape plausible because speed remained formidable and seas obstructed certainty temporarily. Unseen to Bay, the noose tightened incrementally, distance measured carefully, time weaponized by disciplined coordination among Royal Navy units converging. First contact had succeeded perfectly. The shadow secured, and Christmas night marched toward annihilation for a legendary German warship doomed. British shells found their mark, smashing Scharnhorst's forward radar array and plunging the battleship into sudden electronic blindness. Without radar eyes, speed became dangerous uncertainty, forcing Bey to choose instinct over fading information amid Arctic chaos and brutal pressure now. The loss transformed the tactical picture instantly, reducing calculated movement into guesswork shaped by darkness, snow, and violent seas. Bey understood that without electronic sight, continued pursuit invited encirclement, demanding withdrawal before British coordination tightened irreversibly around his ship. Orders followed quickly, engines pushed harder while smoke generators deployed, seeking concealment through artificial fog and natural storms. The battleship surged forward blindly, trusting speed alone to preserve distance from cruisers whose unseen radars still tracked relentlessly. German gunners fired sporadically toward fading star shells, hoping disruption might break contact despite limited targeting confidence. Every salvo risked revealing position, yet silence felt equally dangerous, illustrating how blindness distorted every decision simultaneously aboard Scharnhorst. Below decks tension sharpened. Crews sensed vulnerability previously unknown aboard their proud ship. Training emphasized confidence in armor and speed. Yet invisible enemies eroded morale more effectively than visible gunfire ever could. Bey faced narrowing choices: continue southward, retreat, or alter course toward uncertain waters eastward. Returning to port promised survival, yet required faith that speed alone could defeat coordinated British pursuit through treacherous seas. Reports from engineering warned of strain. Turbines screamed under sustained maximum output, while ice threatened balance. Still Bey pressed onward, believing momentum remained his only remaining weapon against converging forces unseen ahead. The Arctic itself compounded danger. Waves slammed hull plating rhythmically, snow blinded lookouts, wind erased auditory cues. Without radar, even geography became uncertain, increasing risk of steering directly toward stronger British formations unknowingly. British cruisers maintained shadow patiently, confident the radar kill had sealed Scharnhorst's fate. Signals flowed southward calmly, informing heavier units that prey now ran blind and predictably through constrained corridors. On Scharnhorst's bridge, discipline masked anxiety. Orders remained crisp though options vanished. Speed replaced strategy entirely, converting battle into flight, with every minute gambling survival against unseen calculation. Thus radar's destruction reshaped the night decisively, turning Hunter into quarry despite formidable power. Blinded at speed, Scharnhorst fled into narrowing darkness, choices already made steering her toward inevitable confrontation ahead. Bey chose the course toward home waters, confidence rooted in Scharnhorst's unmatched speed and belief British forces lagged behind. That decision committed the battleship to predictable lanes, unknowingly aligning her path directly toward heavier units waiting patiently beyond the storm's concealment. The turn for port felt logical, preserving ship and crew after incomplete engagement. Yet by choosing withdrawal rather than evasive maneuvering, Bey surrendered initiative, allowing British commanders to anticipate movement and position overwhelming force with mathematical certainty. Scharnhorst thundered southward at near maximum revolutions, hull shuddering as engines strained continuously. Speed offered reassurance aboard ship, masking the truth that velocity without awareness merely hastened arrival at danger rather than safety. Without radar, navigational confidence relied on charts and estimation, errors growing with every mile traveled blind. Currents, wind, and snow subtly altered course, nudging Scharnhorst along vectors unseen, but carefully predicted by British plotting rooms ashore and afloat. Bey reassured his officers, believing separation from cruisers confirmed escape. What he did not know was that shadowing never ceased, cruisers adjusting silently, transmitting updates that stitched Scharnhorst's flight into a coherent, deadly British operational picture. Below decks fatigue mounted, machinery teams pushing beyond normal tolerances while damage control monitored accumulating stress. The ship still functioned superbly, but endurance had limits, and sustained maximum power eroded margins needed for later combat survival. The Arctic night concealed everything equally, reinforcing German belief in successful disengagement. Yet concealment favored those with electronic sight, and Scharnhorst's blindness meant every mile traveled reduced options rather than expanding them. Bey's confidence hardened into assumption into fatal error. Returning home felt safe because it aligned with instinct, not realizing British strategy depended precisely on that predictable instinctive retreat. British commanders watched plots converge, recognizing the decisive moment approaching steadily. They allowed Scharnhorst to run, knowing pursuit mattered less than positioning the executioner directly across her path. Thus the fatal turn committed Scharnhorst irrevocably, sealing geometry of battle already determined, confidence born of speed-blinded judgment, converting escape into approach, and transforming survival instinct into instrument of destruction. By the time realization dawned, distances closed too tightly for reversal. The road home led instead toward annihilation, shaped not by cowardice or weakness but by one rational decision made without full vision. Far to the south, HMS Duke of York waited in darkness, engines barely murmuring as Arctic seas rolled heavily beneath her massive hull. Admiral Sir Bruce Fraser stood composed, trusting intelligence, radar, and patience, knowing prey would arrive exactly where calculation predicted. Fraser's force moved cautiously, preserving concealment while radar screens glowed steadily within armored compartments. Below, operators tracked approaching echoes methodically, translating invisible movement into certainty, while gunnery crews waited beside towering turrets in disciplined stillness. The Duke of York represented decisive power, 10 14-inch guns capable of obliterating any surface opponent afloat. Fraser understood this encounter would determine more than victory, it would end Germany's surface threat in northern waters permanently. British doctrine emphasized control, not haste, and Fraser embodied that philosophy perfectly tonight. He restrained speed deliberately, ensuring positioning remained flawless, allowing Scharnhorst to approach unaware, committed, and increasingly trapped by geometry alone. Radar reports refined continuously, bearings adjusted calmly, confidence growing with every plotted mile. Unlike the Germans, Fraser possessed clarity, understanding exactly where his enemy traveled, how fast, and with what diminishing options remaining. Weather aided concealment, snow and wind masking wake and sound, reinforcing British advantage quietly. The Duke of York advanced unseen, her bulk ghost-like against black seas, while Scharnhorst rushed blindly toward this silent wall of steel. Fraser anticipated German confidence would persist. Assuming escape already achieved, that assumption pleased him, because certainty dulled caution, ensuring Bey would not alter course aggressively enough to escape the tightening British net. Orders aboard Duke of York remained minimal, tension controlled through discipline and experience. Gunners rehearsed mentally, radar operators refined solutions, and officers waited patiently, understanding restraint now guaranteed annihilation moments later. The northern darkness concealed two very different states of awareness. British certainty and German ignorance. Fraser exploited that imbalance ruthlessly, knowing battles were often decided before first shot, through information rather than courage or firepower. As distance closed, Fraser allowed himself quiet satisfaction, though no celebration softened focus. He had come personally to destroy Scharnhorst, and now watched inevitability unfold precisely as planned beneath the polar night. The trap reached maturity silently. Every calculation aligned. Every ship positioned exactly when contact came. It would be sudden, overwhelming, and final, ending the hunt with devastating clarity and historical consequence forever. The first British star shells burst directly ahead, tearing darkness open and revealing an immense silhouette crossing Scharnhorst's bow. Konteradmiral Bey instantly understood the danger, realizing this was no cruiser screen but a battleship positioned perfectly for destruction. Duke of York opened fire with thunderous precision, her 14-inch guns erupting together and shaking the frozen sea. Shells arced invisibly before crashing around Scharnhorst. Water columns towering, steel shrieking, the trap revealing itself violently at last. One massive shell smashed into Scharnhorst's forward turret Anton, penetrating armor and annihilating everyone inside instantly. Flames and debris erupted upward, forcing emergency flooding of adjacent magazines, permanently silencing half the ship's main battery. Bey ordered evasive action immediately, turning hard to port while returning fire with remaining turrets. The maneuver bought moments only, as British radar maintained flawless solutions, adjusting aim calmly despite snow and evasive movement. Duke of York's gunners fired methodically, each salvo correcting previous fall, tightening the pattern relentlessly. Scharnhorst's speed diminished under damage and strain, engines still roaring but no longer delivering decisive separation. German shells splashed near Duke of York, straddling occasionally, reminding Fraser of lingering danger. Then a German salvo struck, disabling British radar temporarily, injecting tension and proving Scharnhorst remained lethal even wounded. Fraser reacted instantly, shifting to secondary control and optical methods, maintaining pressure despite reduced electronic advantage. British discipline prevailed. Fire continued uninterrupted, ensuring Scharnhorst never regained initiative during the critical exchange. Scharnhorst's turret Bruno briefly returned to action after confusion cleared flooding orders. Its guns fired defiantly, but a direct hit soon rocked the turret, filling compartments with smoke and forcing evacuation once again. Now only the aft turret Caesar remained operational, firing alone against overwhelming opposition. The imbalance grew grotesque. One German turret challenging an intact battleship whose broadside dwarfed any reply. Shell after shell struck Scharnhorst's superstructure, igniting fires, shredding communications, killing officers and crew alike. The ship slowed perceptibly, her fate no longer uncertain but tragically delayed by lingering resistance. British cruisers closed from multiple directions, torpedoes poised, encircling the battered battleship completely. The trap had sprung fully, leaving Scharnhorst surrounded, burning, and condemned beneath the merciless Arctic night. Battleship faced battleship only briefly, the outcome predetermined by preparation and positioning. This was no duel of equals, but an execution shaped by radar, patience, and a single fatal course chosen hours earlier. British fire intensified relentlessly, shells crashing into Scharnhorst from multiple bearings as flames spread unchecked across decks. Steel buckled, compartments collapsed, and shockwaves rippled through the hull, while crew fought desperately amid smoke, heat, and freezing seawater flooding inward. Each impact stripped capability, power lines severed, communications shattered, and command reduced to shouted orders. Scharnhorst still moved, but movement became survival rather than strategy. Engines pushing despite damage, as firestorms illuminated the Arctic night mercilessly. The aft turret Caesar continued firing stubbornly, its crew isolated yet determined beneath collapsing armor. Every salvo felt symbolic rather than decisive, defiance against inevitability, as British shells answered with crushing weight and mathematical precision repeatedly. Explosions tore through superstructure levels, killing officers, medics, and signalmen alike without distinction. Damage control teams worked blindly, hoses freezing, pumps failing, yet discipline endured, men refusing surrender despite overwhelming destruction closing around them. British gunnery maintained rhythm, corrections small, patterns tight, fire unrelenting. Duke of York's massive guns hammered methodically, treating Scharnhorst not as rival but as target, dismantling her piece by piece. Fires reached ammunition hoists and secondary batteries, forcing abandonments and sealing compartments forever. Internal explosions compounded external punishment, turning the ship into a labyrinth of smoke, flame, and falling steel trapping survivors inside. Speed bled away gradually. Turbines strained, shafts vibrated dangerously, steering responded sluggishly. Scharnhorst's once defining advantage evaporated, leaving her exposed, battered, and unable to escape encirclement tightening by the minute. Crew morale fractured unevenly, fear and resolve coexisting under impossible conditions. Some prayed, some cursed, others worked silently, all understanding survival now depended entirely on chance rather than command decisions anymore. British cruisers joined the assault more boldly, shells striking flanks and stern repeatedly. The battleship reeled under cumulative punishment, stability compromised, lists developing as water poured through ruptured compartments unchecked. Caesar fired again, then again, until shock and smoke overwhelmed remaining crews. The final German gun fell silent, leaving Scharnhorst defenseless, her voice extinguished beneath thunderous British salvos dominating the frozen sea. Now the ship endured rather than fought, absorbing blows without reply. Steel rang continuously. Fires roared unchecked, and the Arctic swallowed wreckage, as Scharnhorst's destruction approached with grim, unstoppable certainty. Under hammering blows, the mighty warship transformed into a burning ruin. Guns, fire, and steel had finished their work, leaving only survival instincts amid collapsing structure as the end drew brutally close. Scharnhorst turned eastward under full power, engines screaming despite damage, seeking escape through darkness rather than victory. This desperate flight transformed battle into pursuit, with every remaining knot bought by sacrifice, as British guns continued hammering relentlessly from astern and flanks. Maximum revolutions strained machinery beyond design limits, vibrations shaking bulkheads and loosening fittings throughout the hull. Engineers fought to maintain pressure, knowing failure meant immediate annihilation, while command gambled everything on outrunning torpedoes gathering silently ahead within narrowing seas tonight. British cruisers surged closer during the chase, firing intermittently to harass and steer the wounded battleship eastward. Their role was containment, not destruction, channeling Scharnhorst precisely toward torpedo solutions forming patiently around her battered silhouette across frozen waters, relentlessly closing fast. Inside Scharnhorst, smoke thickened passageways, lights failed, and wounded men lay where they fell amid chaos. Medical teams worked without supplies, choosing who might live minutes longer, while fires crept unchecked toward vital compartments deep within the hull structure, groaning constantly. Bey understood survival odds shrinking rapidly, yet ordered continued flight east, rejecting surrender entirely. Honor, duty, and obligation to crew demanded resistance, even as rational assessment confirmed escape unlikely against disciplined British coordination closing mercilessly through Arctic darkness tonight onward. Scharnhorst's speed fluctuated unpredictably, damage reducing efficiency despite full throttle commands. Every slight deceleration invited torpedo attack, forcing engineers to risk catastrophic failure rather than ease strain, as survival hinged on maintaining momentum alone across hostile seas relentlessly pursued still. British destroyers raced ahead invisibly, calculating intercept points while maintaining radio silence. Their torpedoes represented final instruments, designed to finish what gunnery began, as coordinated maneuver boxed Scharnhorst into fatal geometry within the darkened eastern approaches, now closing rapidly together. Fatigue overwhelmed crews on all sides, yet discipline held firm under relentless pressure. German sailors continued stations grimly, while British crews executed orders methodically, both bound by professionalism despite unequal circumstances shaping the outcome of the running fight eastward tonight. The running fight extended painfully, minutes stretching into eternities aboard Scharnhorst. Each explosion altered balance and speed, while charts lost meaning, replaced by instinctive steering toward any darkness not yet filled with shells and torpedoes waiting ahead, unseen somewhere close. British command recognized the moment nearing completion, coordinating destroyer approaches with precision. Timing mattered absolutely, ensuring torpedoes struck together, overwhelming defenses simultaneously, leaving no avenue for evasion despite Scharnhorst's desperate maneuvers under continuous fire and darkness surrounding all sides now. Water poured through breaches, reducing stability and sealing fate as pumps failed gradually. Lists increased, steering lagged, and power flickered, yet engines still drove forward stubbornly, embodying refusal to yield while life remained aboard the doomed battleship Scharnhorst tonight alone. This desperate eastward run represented Scharnhorst's final assertion of will against certainty. Speed no longer promised escape, only delay, buying moments of existence, before converging torpedoes would conclude the battle irrevocably beneath frozen Arctic seas and history's gaze watching silently. Flames consumed Scharnhorst, as Arctic night yielded to pre-dawn gloom, smoke billowing high into freezing air while the wounded ship struggled in a futile attempt to continue. Fire raged uncontrollably across decks, leaving steel twisted, turrets silenced, and engines struggling as human courage faced inevitable annihilation amid chaos. Crew members abandoned stations where possible, climbing toward lifeboats or open decks, yet icy seas and fire presented simultaneous death threats. Shouts mingled with alarms, metal screeches, and explosions, creating a cacophony of destruction, while every decision became a gamble against the overwhelming power of British ordnance and nature's fury. Konteradmiral Bey remained on the bridge, observing his ship's collapse with grim determination. He coordinated what he could, issuing orders to maintain control and slow sinking, but damage was catastrophic, and discipline stretched to its limit, as explosions continued tearing vital compartments apart throughout the vessel. Water poured into breached hull sections, extinguishing fires locally but worsening stability, creating a deadly mixture of flame, smoke, and rising cold water that trapped many below decks. Crew movement became increasingly impossible, and communication lines had failed entirely, leaving men to rely on instinct and shouted directions from surviving officers. The aft turret Caesar fired one last defiant salvo before succumbing to flooding and fire, silencing the final German gun. The impact of British shells had rendered it useless, but it symbolized resistance, courage, and determination, a final gesture of defiance in a battle that had already been decided long before. British forces continued to fire intermittently, ensuring the ship remained incapacitated, though most destruction was now internal, as Scharnhorst struggled to remain upright. Explosions from boilers, magazines, and collapsing superstructure tore through the vessel, reducing her once feared power to wreckage, while the Arctic night seemed almost indifferent to human struggle. Men leaped into freezing waters, battling both hypothermia and waves, with survival determined as much by luck as skill. Lifeboats and rafts were limited, forcing desperate measures, while British ships maneuvered cautiously to avoid endangering their own crews, leaving a horrific tableau of chaos and bravery on the water. Some crew attempted damage control despite near-certain death, fighting fire and water in a last effort to save shipmates. Yet the relentless combination of shelling, flooding, and freezing conditions made heroic effort largely futile, with survival now measured in minutes rather than hours. Konteradmiral Bey ordered final abandon ship as Scharnhorst listed severely, her keel rising from the waves at impossible angles. Officers and enlisted men alike scrambled to escape, with discipline maintained only by proximity to survival rather than command authority, illustrating both courage and tragedy simultaneously. As dawn broke, Scharnhorst's silhouette faded into smoke and fire, and she slipped beneath the Arctic waves with a final roar. Hundreds had survived, but hundreds more perished, leaving an indelible mark on the Kriegsmarine and the Royal Navy alike, a costly lesson in strategy, firepower, and human endurance. The sinking revealed the human cost of naval warfare, combining technological superiority, strategic patience, and deadly execution. Survivors recalled chaos, fear, and heroism, their stories preserving the scale of tragedy and courage alike, ensuring Scharnhorst's final hours remained emblematic of both loss and valiant struggle. Ultimately, the mighty Scharnhorst, once the pride of the Kriegsmarine, became a testament to fire, steel, and human sacrifice. Her sinking demonstrated the lethal consequences of miscalculation, the precision of British naval coordination, and the bravery of men confronting inevitable death amid Arctic darkness, forever cementing this engagement in history.